He had his gun, so he just swung it open.
I start to notice that, the atmosphere feels a little bit weird.
First thing he seen was this 6.5 foot tall, broad shoulder, dark hair. That freaked him out.
We hadn't talked to her about like life and death and what any of that means. She's 3 years old,
So we turned around. Suddenly there's a whole tree falling across the road.
And she was describing to us that, there was a deceased person that she could see visually.
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, where we tackle the ever-expanding history and mystery of monsters and supernatural madness every Monday. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca for more information, or even check out exclusive content and support us at patreon.com/CryptidClues.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues, the show where we dive into the unknown. However, let it be known, we aren't experts in this field, just simply a couple of Canadians covering the chaotically confusing histories and mysteries of our home, realm, universe, however you would call it. Now, of course, plugs are in the intro, so you know where to find us. I do, however, want to shout out last week's episode where we focused on time travel. Reuben did a fantastic job hosting it, and we were prompted with some great discussions. So check that out if you haven't yet. It's available on all our feeds. We also got a few interviews lined up for this next month and a bit, which we're excited to unveil, which I'll probably unveil at the end of this episode as we near it for what we got lined up for next week. Other than that, we have a nice introductory episode today that's going to be looking into an incredibly in-depth topic, being the pyramids. So, to start us off, we're going to hone in on a specific person by the name of Carl Richard Lepsius. In 1842, this gentleman was commissioned, along with others, by King Frederick Wilhelm IV of Prussia to lead an expedition to Egypt and the Sudan to basically explore and record the remains of ancient Egyptian civilizations. So, this expedition reached Giza in November of 1842, and they spent 6 months making some of the first and the most incredible discoveries regarding the Giza pyramids. Team actually discovered 67 pyramids in the region, along with more than 130 tombs of noblemen. Now, this catalog of pyramids and information would soon be labeled the Lepsius List, and the ultimate result of this expedition was the published workings called the Denkmaler aus Ägypten und Äthiopien. In short, translation, monuments from Egypt and Ethiopia. So there were 12 volumes total that included nearly 900 plates of ancient Egyptian inscriptions, monuments, and landscapes, and the majority of this information remained as the primary source of reference for Western scholars, well into the 20th century, actually. Heck, even into today's age as well, a lot of this is still referenced and looked at as a source material. And I felt that this was an important place to start, though, because of this man and his team's impact on so many pyramids discovered. And many folks out there are probably not familiar with just how many pyramids were built in human history. Now, I don't have the exact number. It's growing all the time. And of course, the 1800s were a good bit ago. That count of 67, however, has grown drastically since. And from what I've counted now, we're at about 118, give or take, Egyptian pyramids alone having been discovered. Now, that count was from 2018, from what I had managed to research. And up until a few years ago, what was largely considered to be the oldest pyramid, notably in Egypt, is the I always want to call it Dozer, but it's Djoser, the Dozer Step Pyramid, constructed 2,630 years before Christ with a height of 204 feet. This thing reigned supreme. Up until more recent times, this pyramid was proven no longer to be one of the oldest. Archaeologists began discovering similar structures on the other side of the world, specifically Peru, where 2,700 before Christ, up to 20 pyramids were discovered, which again lays the notion down that this site could have been one of the first cities in the Americas. Although certain archaeologists dispute the date of these structures because ancient monuments being dated can become almost impossible to accurately say for certain that they predate the Dozer pyramid. But I digress. This is a good segue into how Egyptian pyramids are for sure the most familiar of pyramids out there, that at least I would boldly state such a thing. But pyramids themselves are not limited to only being Egyptian construction. Civilizations like the Olmec, Mayans, Aztecs, and Incas, they all built pyramids. Now let's also be clear about another thing. The structures that I mentioned before, they're pyramids. Now, absolutely, there are structures out there that go back thousands upon thousands of years. For example, Mont Dekadi, a Neolithic archaeological site in northern Sardinia. The site was constructed by the Oziri culture, with some parts dating back to 4,000 years before Christ. There's also the Typsalk archaeological site in central Iran. Parts of this settlement can be dated back 6,000, 5,500 years before Christ. Some of the oldest archaeological evidence of structural construction comes from the famous Aldupai George site in Tanzania. Now, this structure site is around 1.8 million years old, and there's not really any clue as to which old school human species is responsible for the tools and the structure's construction. But with all that said, again, I digress. Let's get back to the pyramid talk. If we look again at these Egyptian ones, they are certainly a sight to behold. And while conspiracies have certainly gone all over the map with that je ne sais quoi kind of thing, alien landing pads, star maps, conduits, satellites to other realms or space, like the list goes on. And it makes it easier to settle for the plain Jane perspective put forth by researchers when it comes to pyramids. And again, why shouldn't we accept these notions? The religion, kings, emperors, sacrifices, all have evidence and blatant factual backing to support the creation of such historical sites and landmarks such as pyramids. But I have an idea, purely hypothetical, of course. What if it's a case of us holding one piece of the puzzle? And again, hypothetically, aliens holding the other half. We could be holding a puzzle piece and not have any slightest clue of its ability to fit nicely snug against another piece. That piece being from aliens, another ancient civilization from across the world, a star alignment, or much more. But again, purely hypothetical. It's something I like to ponder. And I'm using this as kind of a segue into another mystery, their construction techniques. As I mentioned prior, humans have been building structures for a very, very long time. This question has been a long-standing one that's not yet received a satisfactory answer. One of the most plausible theories is that Egyptians employed a sloping and encircling embankment of brick, earth, and sand, which was increased in height and length as the pyramid rose. Stone blocks would then be hauled up these ramps via the sledges, rollers, and levers. Now, through historical logs, the Great Pyramid of Giza, it took well over a decade to be constructed, of course, with an average workforce around, 14,500 people, kind of peaking at that 40,000 mark. Again, many more people were involved in the construction and building the assets involved with this. But 40,000 alone, that's the size of most cities in North America. I understand as well the number of people required is a result of no pulleys, wheels, or iron tools at all. This information as well is something that I sourced from a construction management study that was carried out by several Egyptologists. And fun fact, they also estimated the number of blocks used in construction was between 2 and 2.8 million. Again, this was limestone that was used here, but they routed down to 2 million though after they incorporated the estimated volume of hollow spaces. So it'd be like the chambers and the galleries inside the pyramids. These calculations also estimate that the workforce could have sustained at a rate of 180 blocks per hour, 3 blocks per minute, with 10-hour workdays per each individual placing a block. Now, again, it's worth noting this isn't fact, and these are all hypothetical results derived from modern third world construction projects that didn't employ the use of modern machinery. Before I continue on, I'm going to be taking a quick ad break and we'll get into some more of the logistics. And we're back. So again, logistically speaking, the dimensions of the Pyramid of Giza are extremely accurate. Spread over a base of 13.1 acres, the whole site is leveled within a fraction of an inch. This degree of accuracy is legitimately comparable with modern construction methods and lasered leveling. So again, how does such a civilization with rudimentary tools achieve such an accuracy that's in line with 20th century technology? That's just one piece of the puzzle. This next part blows my mind. These older human civilizations had a connection with the skies that are horrendously, dare I say, underappreciated in today's society. People don't look up. And I'm sure I've boasted about this before, but we're so fixated in our small bubbles and our lives and society. And that's fair. But at the end of the day, when you lay down in a field or you just look up, it's just so powerful how that just continues to go on and on, depending what you believe in, of course. But it's just such a incredible thing to look up at the sky and just see such wonder. And this is something that, let's take the Mayans, for example, using prehistoric observatories, shadow casting devices, and horizon observation to trace the motions of the sun, stars, and planets. This helped them calculate, record, and catalog so accurately that they could predict when specific bodies would be in certain places in the sky in the future. For example, using eclipse tables, Venus tables, and Mars tables, all acting as guides for when these bodies appear in the sky or events would occur, like a calendar, essentially. These interests were spread across the planet through many different cultures, and they again were incorporated into Egypt's pyramid construction. Back to the Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, each corner of this pyramid actually aligns with the directions north, south, east, and west. The answer? Most have accepted the idea that ancient engineers used the motion of the sun. And in fact, in the year 2000, an individual by the name of Kate Spence of Cambridge University actually published a research paper that demonstrated how the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper were used to help align the pyramids in a north-south direction. So it's certainly evident that the pyramids were built with the celestial sky notion in mind. If we wanted to bring in controversy, however, that would be the notion that each of the 3 pyramids of Giza was specifically built in an oriented position to represent Orion's belt. This alignment, however, is not perfect, but is exceptionally similar. Is that reason enough? Absolutely not, especially when you take into account that the stars are not in the same place now as they were 2,000 years ago. Everything in the universe and beyond is constantly moving in time and space. Again, it's not enough to enforce this notion, especially when computer analysis show the Orion star positions don't necessarily, in fact, line up with the pyramid's positions thousands of years ago. So you can see where the controversy unravels here, but I digress. I leave it up to personal perception. A fun fact, though, with the dating of the pyramids, sure, we can use the rock and soil to help establish that period of time, but due to the Egyptians using the stars for construction of certain monuments in these structures, or at least the directions of each corner creation of the pyramids of Giza, it allows us nowadays to use the stars and backtrack their creation date fairly accurately, which I think is fascinating. We have to remember, a lot of Egyptian culture is full of symbolism, literally. Hieroglyphics, for example. So this again adds to the importance of each pyramid's placement. For example, now did you know most of the pyramids were built on the west side of the Nile? The reasoning behind this, from what I had researched, is due to the Egyptians' belief of the afterlife intertwining with the sun. Now, Osiris, an Egyptian god affiliated with the afterlife, was also a representation of new life and over time became more affiliated with the cycle of the sun and how it brought forward growth and life. So the setting sun would represent death in the west each night. Now, the souls of those buried in the pyramids would connect with the setting sun before rising again in the morning, thus symbolizing eternal life. So having the pyramids placed to the west would metaphorically signify death. Now, as we kind of close out this week's episode, I'm going to share a few cool facts here that are just perplexing. Some of the blocks moved to construct the pyramids weighed between 2.5 and 15 tons each. Others, 50-ton stone blocks. That's freaking heavy. The Sphinx, another wonder in itself. The head of a human, body of a lion, was constructed in a position where it could protect the Great Pyramid of Giza. The Sphinx is 73 meters long, 6 meters wide, and 20 meters high. Again, this is another representation I find very fascinating. And like we mentioned before, how this culture is very symbolic with their representation. It just makes me wonder, is the Sphinx some sort of representation that they wanted to represent, something they had seen? I feel like when cultures see things, they jot them down. If you look into certain things about Sumerian objects, it's very, very fascinating, the kind of things that they have. Like, Google it. I'm gonna have to do an episode on that with Reuben. Moving on, however, I digress. The Nile Valley, known as Nubia, which is north of present-day Sudan, was the site of 3 ancient kingdoms called the Kushite. These Nubian pyramids were built left, right, and center. They were I think double the amount that it was located in like the more central Egypt areas. Now, they were very similar to the signature Egyptian pyramids, of course, but were much more smaller scale, hence their mass production. And personally, if you've listened to me this far, you know I love a good tunnel network. The pyramids of Egypt share a series of intricate web tunnels and mysterious chambers and shafts underneath. Not many people know about the tunnels, or not many people at all have access, because most of these tunnel excavations are supervised by the government, and the information gets withheld with a lot of confidentiality, which I understand. A lot of these artifacts found get kept in secrecy. You don't want people to come in and like fondle them, touch them, and damage them, steal them for sure. But then, all that being said, why should the government be allowed to hoard these items from the public eye? I don't think we have necessarily the like a big warehouse filled with these things kept out of the public eye, and not to go full Indiana Jones here, but the people, the culture, and the future descendants have a right to these discoveries. These things should be in a museum for everyone to enjoy and understand. Put them somewhere in a place that we can observe and study, and then enforce those places and keep them secure. Tunnel excavations alone, gosh, that's a red flag for me. With the government cornering it off and keeping it in their jurisdiction, that just seems wrong. The only thing that I could really think of, like logically speaking, is probably, again, protection, but there's probably things that might contradict or intertwine with our history that I feel like they want to be kept under the rug. They don't want out there in the public. I feel like our view of history is very linear, and to branch out from that, you are ostracized and cast off into the corner, into the sidelines, the ditch. I feel like there's a little bit more to our history, and history is changing, and we are losing touch with where we've come from, who we were, and where we should be heading. But again, my own perspective. Getting back, though, to finally the pyramids being seen from space. All three of the Giza pyramids, to be specific. It'd be interesting if this also doubled as some sort of coordination from space. Maybe for, again, no facts on this, alien ships to navigate and coordinate things on the Earth. Bear in mind, it's a complete theory, no factual credibility whatsoever. But it's interesting to think about. When you look at how many things are visible from space, I'm sure at nighttime you can see half the planet is lit up like a Christmas tree with all of our lights turned on, but it's still very interesting to see a man-made structure and not a electrical one all the way from space. And I wasn't going to sneak this in, but UFOs, like we got to keep on this train. UFOs that have been sighted that resemble pyramid shapes or at least triangles. Now, Reuben and I reviewed these videos back when we talked about UFOs, and it's the ones the Pentagon had authenticated and put out and claimed as being real UFO videos. Again, not necessarily alien, but definitely unidentified objects. And they were stated as being more pyramid triangular-like. Now, if you have a civilization that heavily catalogs what they visually see in monuments, like I mentioned before, glyphs and forms of art, wouldn't the pyramids be one heck of a way to pay tribute as a sort of reflection to what is flying in the sky and could ultimately be interpreted as a deity back in the day? Of course, that's my own take. But all in all, I think that pretty much wraps up this introductory episode. Now, there's so much more to investigate when it comes to pyramids around the world, including the pyramids in other cultures and ages, aside from just Egyptian ones. And this is something I'm going to bring Reuben into because I really want to look into Chinese pyramids and structures and get into more Sumerian artifacts and objects and structures. Now, new discoveries are constantly being made, even in today's society, with Egyptian pyramids. It's incredible. And we'll be covering much more of it. However, until then, you can find us on our website, CryptidClues.ca, our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, as well as our Patreon, where you can get those ad-free early episodes there. And should you wish to contact us directly, you can via our email, CryptidClues@gmail.com. And one more show note. So, should our scheduling pan out, next week we'll be releasing our latest interview episode. We're going to have a guest come on to the show, and we're going to be talking about flat Earth and a whole bunch of different things that are incorporated into this. And I'm very excited to hear this perspective and this take. It's going to be very, very fascinating. So again, I hope you'll be able to tune in for that. And with that, remember everyone, Take care and stay safe.